In 2003, we bought our first rent house, and when we showed up at closing, we found out we'd been lied to, and the interest rate was 11%. Back then, you weren't promised a disclosure before closing. In 2007, we bought another rent house as a short sale, and at our final walkthrough before closing, the seller told us, oh, by the way, there's a slab leak under the house. Closing day can be its own definition of disaster, okay? But the one thing you shouldn't have to face are unexpected costs. So today, we're digging deep. We're talking about the top hidden costs you need to look out for when you're buying a home. Well, hello, this is Wendy Pennell, and if you know anything about buying a home, you already know closing costs are typically gonna run you like 3 to 5% of your loan. They're broken down into lender fees, title fees, third-party fees, and then setting up your escrow account. Well, those are the ABCs of closing costs, okay? But in this video, we're gonna dig deeper, right? Okay, we're gonna discuss those costs that no one else is talking about. Now, if you think about it, like I said, closing costs, they can range anywhere from 3 to 5% of the purchase price. And I think most buyers, are led to expect this, but think through, like how much of a cost range 3 to 5% could be. Okay, if the home costs $300,000, it means the range of closing costs for the buyer is anywhere from $9,000 to $15,000. Now, what this means is that some home buyers could be paying $6,000 more for the same home. Okay, so when we're thinking about these hidden closing costs, whether you purchase an existing home or new construction can have a huge impact on your costs. Now, so right off the bat, right, you need to be thinking about whether you're buying pre-owned home or new construction, because that can make, again, a very big difference in your closing costs as well as what to look out for. Let's take a look at hidden costs with new construction. Now, possibly the biggest difference for new construction is that all the different home builders are going to use their attorneys to create their own contracts with all kinds of different terms and provisions. Now, this is the case whether you're buying a home within a development or working with a custom builder, okay? It doesn't make a difference there. Now, the beauty of real estate, everything is supposed to be negotiable, okay? But that really isn't the case with builder contracts. They don't want those contracts changed in any way, and you better believe these can impact your closing costs along with long-term costs as well. For example, let's talk about earnest money. When it comes to your earnest money deposit, the Perry Homes contract states that purchaser may terminate the contract and receive a refund earnest money minus a termination fee to seller of 50% of the earnest money only if purchaser fails to qualify for financing and notifies seller of same in writing within 14 days. Meanwhile, the Antares Homes contract states if within 30 days of the effective date, buyer is unable to obtain a conditional qualification letter through no fault of buyer, buyer may terminate the contract in writing, after which the initial deposit will be refunded. Or how about this clause from Bellhaven Homes? And honestly, I think this is the most egregious builder contract I've ever seen. In this contract, it separates earnest money from initial cash payment. And get this, the initial cash payment is non-refundable from the minute you make it. In a recent sale we were negotiating, the builder was trying to charge $500 for the earnest money and $18,000 for the initial cash payment. When it comes to applying for a mortgage, the contract read, if purchaser desires to obtain financing for any portion of the total sales price, purchaser must furnish builder with reasonable evidence of financial arrangements within 15 days. Failure to provide reasonable evidence shall be an act of default. So if you can't get pre-approved for a mortgage, that's an act of default, okay? So let's see what that means. Well, if we read paragraph 9 of the contract, it describes what can happen if the purchaser defaults, okay? It says if the purchaser defaults, builder may terminate the contract and retain the initial cash payment and the earnest money as liquidated damages or seek recovery of any and all damages suffered by builder. So with this contract, not only do you not get a grace period if you're not pre-approved for a loan, but the builder will keep your initial cash payment, your earnest money, and could potentially come after you for damages. So did you catch that difference? Okay, here's the thing. Earnest money deposits with new construction can range anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. If you're buying a home with Perry Homes, and you can't get your financing, they keep a full 50% of your deposit, right? 50%. You could lose $25,000 of your $50,000 deposit right out of the gate if you sign a contract and then you can't get a loan. Now, Antares, on the other hand, is like, hey, can't get a loan, you can get your deposit back. And then we have, Bellhaven, who's like, you didn't get pre-approved for your loan. We want everything. So you use Perry and you can't get a loan, you lose half your earnest money. You use Antares, you get the whole amount back. You use Bellhaven and you lose it all right? You haven't even made it to closing and you have a ridiculous hidden cost there. Oh, and just for fun, want to know what happens in the Bellhaven contract if the builder's in default? This is what paragraph 9 reads, all right? If the builder is in default, purchaser may terminate this contract and recover the earnest money, which will constitute purchaser's sole recovery. So they require an $18,000 initial cash payment and a $500 earnest money deposit. And if the builder defaults, you only get your $500 back, okay? He still gets to keep the $18,000 initial cash payment. I have seriously thought about doing an entire video on this one contract, right? I would entitle it Worst Contract I Have Ever Read. People need to know these kinds of builder contracts exist, and you need to know about these hidden costs. Okay, origination fees and discount points with the builder's lender. These are another very unwelcome surprise we need to talk about. A lot of times the lender will quote you a certain interest rate and it sounds great, but then you find out they're charging you a ton for it in discount points. This could also be coming from the builder side. Remember, they are affiliated, right? So for example, the builder is offering a 5% fixed rate mortgage if you use their lender. Then you take a look at your estimated closing costs and you find out, wow, they're not being quite as generous as you thought. I mean, essentially, this can be a lot of smoke and mirrors, okay? They promise you a low rate, or that they'll pay your closing costs, but then they make that up by adding more to your closing costs. On top of that, origination fees don't cover the cost of yet another hidden cost, the appraisal. Regardless of the result of the appraisal, the buyer faces a charge of $500 to $600. Now you might be thinking $500 to $600, okay, Wendy, that's not atrocious, but hang on because it gets worse, all right? One thing you need to know about appraisals is how crucial the appraisal is towards the cost of closing on a new construction home. The fact is that when an appraisal falls below the agreed to purchase price, it reduces the amount granted for the loan. So as to make up the difference, yeah, the buyer, okay? The buyer's responsible. That means if the appraisal comes in $10,000 below the agreed on price, the buyer needs to bring an additional $10,000 to the closing table. Every single new construction lender I have ever worked with to date, okay, they all have this rule. If the home doesn't appraise, they are not coming down on price. You as the buyer are making up the difference. Exactly when you close matters a lot more with new construction, and herein lies another hidden cost. If you're unable to close on the scheduled day, most builders will charge you extra for each additional day. If you're working with Bloomfield, you'll read, if the purchaser fails to timely close as provided herein, the parties agree that the contract price of the property will increase by $100 per day starting on the 5th day after substantial completion. Now, how about Normandy homes? The Normandy contract reads, if purchaser fails to close on the closing date, in addition to and without precluding any other remedies, purchaser shall pay seller $250 for each day from the closing date until purchaser closes on the property. So $100 a day, $250 a day. Okay, this is sounding pretty painful, but K. Hovnanian definitely wins the prize on this one, okay? If you can't close on time with K. Hovnanian, it's gonna set you back by $500 per day. Their contract reads this way: if purchaser asks to delay the closing date for any reason, including due to delays caused by purchaser's lender, and seller agrees to same, then purchaser agrees to pay seller an extension fee equal to $500 times the number of calendar days from the scheduled closing date until the extended closing date, and purchaser will forfeit any incentives applied by seller. Now, just imagine how quickly $500 a day could add to your closing costs. Yet another hidden closing cost comes in the form of something called an escalation clause. An escalation clause refers to how the final cost of the home could change without notice based on the builder's cost increases for materials. Now think about the recent lumber shortage, okay, and how that could add thousands of dollars to the costs, leading, an unsuspecting buyer, right, to not be able to afford to close. Given recent supply chain issues, right, tens of thousands of dollars could be at stake if a buyer is suckered into this clause. So you've got yet another hidden cost that could completely derail your purchase. Now, we've talked about the hidden costs with new construction. So let's talk about pre-owned homes, okay? With pre-owned homes, the contract is known as a TREC promulgated form. It is beautifully neutral, all right? Meaning it's written to protect both parties equally. So all those traps we just talked about, right? Those don't happen when you use the TREC contract. For example, if you apply for a loan and your financing falls through, you decide from the beginning how long your contingency period is. If your loan falls through during that time, you get your earnest money back. So you're not gonna be like, Perry Homes where you lose half of your earnest money, or Bellhaven where they take all of it. All right. Now, how about those discount points? Well, with a pre-owned home, you're not going to get a special reduced rate mortgage, okay? So that is a definite bummer. However, you do get to pick any lender you want, because again, they're not affiliated, right? The seller has nothing to do with the lender. So how about appraisals? Well, the TREC contract has various protections that cover you in case a home doesn't appraise for the purchase price. You, as the buyer, get to decide how much protection you want, and the seller decides if he'll accept that or not. You're most certainly not forced to make up the difference unless you decide that you're willing to do that. Now, how about if you can't close on time? All right, what does that look like for pre-owned homes? Well, essentially it doesn't, okay? It really doesn't look like anything. With a pre-owned home, there are no specific fees, and the buyer and seller can either negotiate or let it ride. So hopefully you're getting the idea here that with pre-owned homes, there is just so much more that is negotiable. And really, this is real estate, okay? That's how it's supposed to be. Real estate is supposed to be negotiable, but builders, well, they decide not to be. Okay, so how about those hidden costs that are gonna hit you whether you buy new construction or pre-owned, okay? Let's talk about those. With your loan, you need to read your loan estimate very carefully, okay? Mortgage brokers and banks can nickel and dime you for pulling credit reports, updates, processing fees, courier fees, okay? And all of that can add up. Tom Higgins comments that junk fees tend to be tacked on to the closing cost of the transaction. He describes how amid the scramble to complete last-minute paperwork and the excitement of sealing the purchase, you might lose sight of the additional costs being squeezed out. So keep this in mind. It's always a good idea to get quotes from multiple lenders. Get a loan estimate from them as well. And you can't just look at that interest rate here, all right? You have to dig deeper. And by the way, we at Home in Dallas, we are absolutely here to help you with that. Now, other hidden closing costs you need to know about are the ones that come from your realtor. Some buyers are under the misconception that they will never have to pay a realtor, okay? Or could be that you just never really thought about it. Every realtor is different, but here's the truth about what can happen when you're working with a realtor. Some realtors will start by charging you for a transaction coordinator, okay? This can run you anywhere from like $300 to $500. And what this is it's an administrative role. And what that does is it monitors every step in a sale from the time you're under contract until you make it to closing. It's a job realtors are expected to do, but in this case, the realtor has someone else doing it for them. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But in this case, the realtor is having someone else do their job and making you as the buyer pay for it. Another big one is the realtor's commission. The agreed to commission has to be paid in full at closing. But what is that commission? Well, paragraph 11B of the Texas Real Estate Commission Buyer Representation Agreement states, broker will seek to obtain payment of the commission specified first from the seller, landlord, or their agents. But then it continues, if such persons refuse or fail to pay the broker, client will pay broker the amount specified less any amounts broker receives from such persons. So suppose, you have a realtor that charges a 3% commission. Okay, Lennar Homes, they're a new construction builder, and guess what? They only pay realtors a 1% commission. Depending on the type of representation agreement a buyer had signed, it could mean the buyer would need to pay the remaining 2% as a closing cost. On a $400,000 home, this would add another $8,000 to the closing cost. This is totally the norm with buyer's agents in Texas, and it's another hidden cost you probably never would have expected. By the way, we at Home in Dallas, we choose to accept payment in full from our seller regardless of what they pay. If we sound like your kind of people, you're definitely going to want to check out our Let's Find Home questionnaire that you can find in the description section. Still, another unexpected cost comes from purchasing a home in an HOA community. In Texas, the HOA is legally required to disclose the HOA transfer fees to all parties, which are generally the responsibility of the seller, but of course it's negotiable. Now with new construction, as you might have guessed, the builder is going to make the buyer pay all of it. Transfer fees run between like $100 to like $375, which is not a whole lot, you know, in the grand scheme of things, but you don't want to let that one sneak up on you. Now, some HOAs add a community enhancement fee, which is separate from the transfer fee and could be due at closing. Windsong Ranch in Prosper is an example of this, okay? At Windsong Ranch, this fee is 0.3% of the final sales price. So on a $400,000 home purchase, right, this amount comes to about $1,200. Probably not a fee you counted on. Now, I do have one more unexpected closing cost that happens after closing, and it only applies to new construction. Now, this one hits you months after closing, okay? So let's talk about property taxes. When you take over the responsibility at closing, the tax rate is usually going to end up being based on the property being vacant land. But now the property transitions from land to land plus improvement. Suppose you purchase a new construction luxury home in the Prosper School and Water District, okay? They have the property tax value of the land at $50,000. The taxes at closing will be $1,593.28 for the entire year. This will be prorated between the builder as the seller and you as the buyer. So if you close in March, for example, the builder will pay 3 months worth of that amount, so roughly $400. But now you've been in your home for most of the year, you know, you've gotten all settled, of course you love it, but then November rolls around and the tax bill arrives, right? The appraisal district has reassessed your home correctly as land plus improvement. Okay, now it's valued at $1 million. Your new tax bill is $31,865.63. Right? So now you owe, $31,000, of which the seller paid $400. Seller should have paid, close to $8,000 for owning the home for the first 3 months, but no, they paid just the $400. Now, most of your builders are gonna say prorations are final at closing, and remember, they don't budge on their contracts, all right? So the best thing you can do is know ahead of time. This is gonna hit your wallet, okay? It is absolutely going to, but at least it doesn't have to be, fully unexpected. Now, we've talked a lot about hidden closing costs, but I wanna tell you about a strategy that will actually save you money. And this one works with both existing or new construction. If you have the seller pay your closing costs, or if they're wrapped into your loan, okay, you're gonna love this one. With the right maneuvering, you can have not just 1, but 2 months without mortgage payments after closing. This is especially helpful considering all of the costs you face upon moving in, all right? We're talking about, utilities, internet, security system. You might be buying like new furniture, refrigerator, that sort of thing. So let me tell you how this strategy works. Here's the thing. Monthly mortgage payments are paid in arrears, just like a credit card, okay? If you think about it, this makes sense, right? Because they can't assess the finance charge until after the fact because your balance is always changing. So you don't make your first mortgage payment until after you've lived there for a full month. So here's the strategy. Do what you can to close on your new home between the 1st and 15th of the month. Your goal here is to move before the house payment on your current house is due. Okay, so why is that important? Well, because the month that you move in is paid for out of the closing. All right, so suppose you close on January 10th. The mortgage company has already taken your first 30 days plus interest as part of your closing cost. When February 1st rolls around, you haven't lived in your new home, for 30 days just yet. As a result, your first payment isn't due until March. So structuring your closing this way just brought you 2 full months without having to make a mortgage payment. So just a little strategy, and now you're a little better off after closing. If I am speaking your language on the whole being strategic thing, okay, you're gonna find a lot of that on my channel. In fact, if you're interested in using strategy to find the very best deals in Dallas, you may wanna check out this video here. In the meantime, Wendy out.